natural area actually technically lies in Matt's district, and so I'd like to bring him up and have him say a few words.
All right. Well, I might take a little bit longer, and actually, just one of the sheer pleasures in this job is to work with the many elements and the people that are the composition of those elements. And you know, as we grow and learn, and hopefully we learn, there are many people, many elements that make up our communities. And I had to go through my teen years and my years of purism to come to levels of realism. But in working as a community, there are many elements out there, and our greatest successes come from compromising, working together, and coordinating together. So this is a big part of a compromise in many ways, and there are many partners that we've developed over time. We haven't always agreed with each other, and actually we're starting to agree with each other quite a bit. So that, you know, we might bring in a new partner pretty soon, so we can have some more disagreements out there. Yeah. That's it's amazing. People tend to think in similar ways, but are very passionate about what they think about. Just my own personal experience. I homeschooled my kids. I was homeschooling my kids when I worked at the Arboretum, volunteered, eventually worked in education over there. We built the nature trail at the Arboretum, and while working there, was able to meet a lot of the natural resource coordinators. And you know, I like to say I'm a quiet person that doesn't talk a real lot, but when I have somebody that has an opportunity to do something, I start pestering them, and I'll try every door I can, and try and come up with ideas. My son was giving bird classes there for children. He now teaches at D. Miguel Elementary School. But while there, I talked about Dry Lake, not Rogers Lake, Dry Lake, and I was looking at the ecosystem, and you go from ephemeral wetland into a grassland, shifting into an aspen, oak, conifer mix, and it's rich habitat there. And it was in bankruptcy once upon a time, and I started talking to Rick Miller about that from Game and Fish, and Rick was saying, well, you know, that one's a drop in a bucket. You should see Rogers Lake, and that's when my mind started to become focused on that. And then I got involved in the open spaces and greenways component of the Flagstaff Regional Plan, and in that, the early processes, part of the introduction is an education. And you get to talk to the people on the land as well as the land managers and find out. When we were looking at the open space piece, we started to say, you know, growth is going to occur in the Flagstaff region. We know it's coming. How do we plan wisely associated with that? And then we know we also have state trust lands out there, and the intent of them is to sell them so that our schools can have money, but also to provide for community opportunities as the future starts to come before us. Well, we took a look at the state trust lands and thought, well, there are certain ones in there. We don't want to say pro-growth, no growth, but there are certain ones out there that have high resource values. And that's part of how Rogers Lake started to fall into a consideration of, you know, we need to look at Rogers Lake in a little bit different way than some of the other state trust lands that are surrounding the area. Part of trying to get something to happen when you're dealing with community is, well, you need to incorporate things into plans. Key piece is getting it into the plans, and that's a critical part. Wildlife corridors was a big part of the discussion. How do we keep pure genetic links in our wild populations that are out there? This is a key area. It's an area that connects the Verde Valley, as far as wildlife is concerned, up through the peaks. There's a huge ecosystem that's quite dependent upon this, if not on a permanent sense, in a temporary sense. And then it's a flyway that we get into for migrating species. But if you're going to do something, you have to have a legal way to do it, and there wasn't a legal mechanism out there. And you know, I had eventually gotten elected and liked a lot of what we had been doing with the plans, and we started pushing for the Arizona Preserve Initiative. And I remember my conversation with Jake Flake on this one. It says, you know, part of the conversation was Jake was looking at it as a cattleman, speaking of cattlemen and agreement, my gosh, I see a lot of battles between environmentalists and cattlemen, and I always sit there and look at it, and it was part of my conversation with Jake, and most issues the communities agree upon. There are certain issues, legal issues, or elements that, you know, somebody comes without walking in the other shoes. And often, you know, I see somebody from an environmental perspective will think, well, cattlemen don't know about the environment. By golly, they work the land and they're involved in the environment all along. Well, they were the conversation with Jake on the Arizona Preserve Initiative. We hired Jim Walsh to a legislature as a consultant on behalf of the county to help us push through API, because at the time they were only considering it for the areas around Phoenix and the areas around Pima County, and we had to, and Flagstaff kept falling out of that. We worked together with some of our agencies in the area, and some of these agencies also bubbled up as far as you also need a legal mechanism to move from a financial perspective. And Jim also helped us get legislation along with some of our local agencies so that we actually could have a C-post program, so that you actually could put money towards capital, because counties did not have that authority until that legislation had been run. That's the trick. We got the legal means, but then we have a regional plan and we have to get a buy-in from the general public, and it was set up to go before the people. And in this, I started, Gene Trupiani was asking me, who do you think we should bring into this? And I started thinking, there are so many people that have been involved in this process. But during the initiative, you know, I think of Maria Byers is here, and she's going to get a chance a little bit later on to speak, I believe. But I think at that time Maria was involved with TPO. I don't know, Maria, you wear so many different hats, I started losing track. But it was TPO at the time, Trust for Public Lands. Shelley Silber, I saw Shelley out there with Nature Conservancy. Just stable voice, always there, always keeping us from rolling into our pure intent or getting people upset. Shelley is a stabilizer out there. The Grand Canyon Trust had a whole group of guys: Steele Watkins, Brad Ack, Nikolai Ramsey, Jeff Bernard. Norm Wallen hops in and out, whether he's working with Diablo Trust or he's working with some environmental effort that's going on. In this time, it was working together on the initiative. Chuck Hammersley was a planning and zoning guy, but Chuck, his specialty is Parks and Rec, and he was the treasurer of the C-Post project. Amy and Mike Legier from a public standpoint. So, and actually, you know, the initiative, I could probably go on, and I'm leaving out 50 million people. It seems like community members, the buy-in, with the exception of Page. Page brought our numbers down. We were up in the high 68%, close to 70%. Page didn't feel they had a project in the project, and I think there might have been 2 people in Page that voted for the project, but we dropped down into about the 65% approval rating, which is pretty doggone high for an initiative. Parks and Rec staff, they're all kinds. Todd Grace, Cynthia Lovely, Jan Bush, Jean Trupiano. Jean has been so involved in bringing a lot of the key elements in the end together. She's another one of those stabilizing voices that we have there. The mention of our neighbors that we have here, the Millers, the Monterolas. Mandy already mentioned Wayne and Beverly's love for this property, the Frontier property, the scientific community. We also had beyond the scientific community, the Science Advisory Committee. You know, I think of, we're right where I think they had some of their first meetings is sitting right on these points, sitting around, and yeah, Shala's nodding. She was one part of that. Here's another one that you were in the beginning of, Shala. We just closed up a group with Camp Navajo on the great cleanup that they've been doing there, and Shala started in the beginning of that. And Sarah Reif is out there, and there are a lot of people that do need to be mentioned, and I'm not going to remember them all. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Shala, Game and Fish, Lee Ludiker. I have to say, between Rick Miller and Lee Ludiker, if you want to talk about people that have always been there to apprise us of the value of this resource, they started way back when just like the ranchers in the community saw the value of this property, knew that it was special and needed some level of special treatment associated with it. Okay. So, one last thing. I know I'm going on, but we don't stop there, because there's so much more to do. There's the continuum to build on, the mutual benefit between our stakeholders. You know, we have a dream. True planning, when you're coordinating with partners and you all get it, you can really work well together. This is just a little piece. We've been working cooperatively with Camp Navajo and the Naval Observatory. Soft industry in this area that nobody really thinks about until you look at. We have the military complex. Our young men and women with the military that actually train here with the National Guard. And the Army comes in periodically and trains with them. For the sake of their mission, they need a buffer. For the sake of the impact upon our communities, we need a buffer. And there is an opportunity to coordinate together with them. There's an industrial side up by the highway. There's a bedroom community up in Belmont, Flagstaff Meadows. I think that we can put together a really good regional plan that we're considering environment. We're considering land uses in a rural sense. We're considering the wildlife element that we have out there. So we're not done, and that's the next area that, if you're interested, we want to draw you into it. Okay, I went on too long for you guys, but you know, had to do it. I want to thank you all for your support of this and your involvement, and thanks for coming out too.